Hey folks, Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a sunny day here in Vancouver, and we get into the round 9 summary. And before you judge, folks, we're kind of in uncharted territories. Things are quite crucial in terms of decisions that are being made regarding Japan, and am I making the best strategic decisions? I believe that I am. I've been doing some thinking about it. And so if you have a better idea or suggestion, please comment, but it may be too late. So we'll see. So over here, the Japanese Navy decided to head west and do a sort of a staging area of Celebes. They've got 6 destroyers, 2 fully loaded carriers, and 4 transports, and with a Yamato and a couple submarines in tow. They made this decision here heading towards the Middle East is because they strategically knew they were going to force the British and the Mediterranean to have to make a decision. Are they going to go after the Italian fleet? Or are they going to, make a play for a big landing in Greece and force the Germans? So the Japanese couldn't ignore that. And currently, as it sits, the Axis have 12 victory cities. I am playing with the Sirebled rules, but with the 10 victory cities they have, the ones that are still in play are Cairo, Sydney, Stalingrad, Leningrad, Honolulu, and Moscow. What is probably safe would be San Francisco, London, Washington, and Ottawa. What's also with the Axis control, which could be up for grabs, is Warsaw and Paris. So, but with the victory objectives, there's tied to the Japanese economy and controlling oil territories and resources. So, could the Japanese still win the game for the Axis, despite the Allies going heavily into Western Europe? We'll see. But over here, it was not a great turn overall for the Axis, and we'll get into some of the stuff. So they went into this Northwest Territory. They did completely wipe out the KMT and their pesky fighter that seems to, once it's gone, the KMT's pretty muted. So they went in there, they survived with 3 units and their Air Force. However, the counterattack came from the Russians, which brought all their Air Force from Moscow and 6 units from Novosibirsk. So, and then the British reinforced. So the Japanese now are, sorry about the shadows there, folks, we're going to have to do a little bit of restaging or regrouping. And this is kind of what happens when Japan or any of the nations start to spread out, particularly you're talking about Russia or Germany or Japan, is it gets expensive. And when you start, going multiple territories away from your factories to keep that flow of stuff going, for Japan, they have to start buying fast movers, which gets expensive. And Japan only has 3 factories along the coast here. They've got a factory in Siam, they've got a factory in Shanghai, and 1 in Peking. So they're really bringing 9 units a turn west. They've also got this is gone, a military base here in Calcutta, but it's really going to be their transports and shucking units across from Tokyo to the mainland of Asia that are going to help push west. And the problem with infantry is you have to be committed to doing it every turn. They only move 1 space. If you do it every turn, however, you get this steady flow going, but it gets really expensive, particularly, if you're also dealing with Russian territories where, they have the partisans. So any vacated territory that's under Axis control, if there's no units present, it pops up a partisan. So the Japanese have been leaving a unit behind, which, their objective here isn't to necessarily gain the income from the territory, which was to break the Russian economy and prevent them from sort of spending money to fight the Germans. So that's what this play here and this play here is all about. So they've committed 4 transports here, to head towards the Middle East, or maybe threaten South Africa, or maybe threaten Cairo, but definitely force the British to turn around. The Japanese did build a naval base here off the south coast of the Philippines, and they took Dutch New Guinea last turn. And now I think I did a miscalculation, but they currently have over here 6 transports sitting in the water here and 7 transports sitting up here. So 13 transports total. Are they going to head towards Sydney? That seems to be the play. And there's well over 40 units sitting in Sydney. So that is not going to fall easily. So Japan's going to need some reinforcements. Their Navy is kind of, I hate to say it, but almost kind of useless here sitting. But we'll see what happens. The Japanese did build a couple more transports with a couple amphibious tanks, an SNLF and a carrier, and a couple more submarines. So what's going to happen here? Well, Japan's got now 5 turns to take Sydney, and maybe here threaten the Middle East. And we'll talk about here. The British did move their military bases, which you can move them from southern Iran and Iraq, and they are set up to counterattack. So we'll get into that in a second. Over here on the west coast, America just built a couple more Marines and 4 destroyers and a submarine to get their bonus. Over here on the Eastern Front, things are getting interesting. So the Russians did take Helsinki with all of their fast movers, which now they're a little bit out of position. They will be able to make it back, but their capital now, if the Germans were to go and the Russians were not to reinforce their capital, the Germans have the advantage. So yes, they took Helsinki, they wiped out the colonial factory there, they still hold on to Leningrad, but they are now going to have to reinforce their capital of Moscow. And so does that open the door, sort of a game of ping pong with the Germans. So we'll see what happens there. The Russians built 8 units back in Novosibirsk. They did not want to lose this territory. It's worth 3 NO. And once the Japanese, if they're able to secure, basically all of the KMT and Novosibirsk, they're going to be headed towards Stalingrad. They're going to be headed towards Moscow. And the Allies definitely don't want that. The Americans have not lend-leased the Russians any money, but that is not off the table to occur. Over here, the British in the Middle East, they had to make a decision as well, and whether it was the right decision, what was the wrong. They thought about coming down here with their entire Navy, building an air base and a naval base, and they would have been able to threaten the Japanese Navy and keep them out of the Middle East. But they decided to defend the Middle East, at least for now, with a whole bunch of units, tanks, and infantry sort of stacked up. So they might lose it, but it's going to be a dogfight. But this dogfight is going to be happening between the Japanese and the British. These British units are not now going into Greece or Bulgaria or Romania. So that's going to help the Germans, definitely. The British did annex Turkey last turn, so they get a couple aircraft and about maybe 8 ground units. So that's a little bit of a bonus. But now that it's annexed, does that mean the Germans and the Italians start to come in? The Germans did retake Greece from the British, which was expected. The British decided the target of the Italian Navy needed to go. They came in with overwhelming odds, and they, I think, suffered 5 casualties. They lost 4 destroyers and a submarine. It was 3 destroyers, a submarine, and a Swordfish torpedo bomber. So, and the Americans built a naval base sitting here in the northern Algeria, so the British can get back, because that is American controlled. So the British Navy can come back, but they're a little bit out of position right now. There's still these pesky, Italian submarines that are lurking around here off the coast. They're not at a naval base, so what happens here? The Germans, their economy is hurting. The Italians now are at 20 because they're being convoyed here in this sea zone. And so I think the Germans are at 74, and they don't have their, the access to the funds for Helsinki anymore. So they're going to be around 75 IPP. So they're going to have to build basically infantry. Paris is still a standoff. Nobody can attack anybody because the Allied force is split, and the Germans are definitely stronger in defense. So it's going to take the Americans a couple more turns to, and the British did not have the funds to buy a naval base in Normandy, so the American transports would all be sitting back here. So America still had to build a couple more transports. However, they're coming across next turn with 18 units. The British are going to drop another 10 off next turn. The Canadians 4. So, you know, the Allies are going to win this battle of attrition, but the Germans are doing a good job at slowing them down. The Germans have about 30 units sitting in Western Germany in their entire air force. So the British and the Germans are playing ping pong with Reims. And the reason Reims is important is because Reims is the gateway. So there's two armored trains sitting in Western Germany. If this was German territory at the start of their turn, they could drive their trains, pick up 6 units from Western Germany, go to Paris, drop off 6 units, and then drive back to Western Germany. So the Allies wanted to stop that because currently, as it sits, with the 2 air transports sitting in Germany, the Germans can only reinforce Paris 5 units a turn. So that's a battle of attrition. The Allies are going to win, but once they take Paris, it's only 1 victory city. Yes, the Parisians and the French will, all these Vichy units will all be reconverted, and you know the Parisians or the French can start producing at their industrial complex in Paris again, and so that's going to add to the Allied war effort. But, you know, is it going to be enough to take Western Germany? Is it going to threaten Rome? Is it going to threaten Berlin? We'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely going to keep the Germans spending on both fronts, the Eastern Front and Western Germany. So that is a battle. They can't really afford to do both, but the Italians, Rome is pretty secured now, so maybe Italy now has to maybe build some more fast movers for some can openers to maybe head towards the Eastern Front, or what are they going to do? They got some options there. So over here, South Africa is definitely on the table for the Japanese to take. They've only got 4 units down here. They did build the British built a Churchill tank, which defends it in 8, and there's 3 South Africans there. So, but probably next turn you're going to see the Japanese repair the naval base in Ceylon, and so they could threaten Cairo, they could threaten South Africa, they could threaten the Middle East, and the British Navy's out of position, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's unlikely in this game that the Japanese are able to take Sydney and Hawaii. There's just, I don't know if they're going to have enough transports and units to do it. It's probably going to take, a few more transports to take Sydney, and from that point, they're over here sitting in Hawaii is about at least 20 American ground units. So, once they build a fortification there and fly their airplanes there and build a couple more transports and start shucking units, there could be upwards of 40 units of Americans sitting in Hawaii by the time the Japanese come. Mind you, the Americans are still also going to have to defend San Francisco from the Japanese. So we'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, it's a game kind of similar to BBR. They were winding it down in the later rounds now, and every move, every purchase where you send your transports, where you're heading your forces, are you going to split them or keep them together? These decisions are important because you have to have your mind set on which victory cities or objectives you're strategically trying to do, and do it in the most efficient way possible, and prevent and if you're playing defense, you have to see what your opponent is doing and counteract that. So this is where the game, in terms of the best strategist wins. Now, mind you, I'm the only strategist, but we'll see if there's a maneuver or something that can't be defended by one side or the other. Anyways, thanks for watching, folks. Sorry for the shadows there, and stay tuned for round 10.